Hi, everybody, and welcome to People Are Talking here on Channel 13. I'm Richard Scher.
I'm Oprah Winfrey, and today Cornelius O'Donnell is going to tell us how to make super spectacular meals from leftover stuff.
But first, we are going to meet a child psychologist who says you do not have to see the child to deal with his problems. Dr. Jacob Azerrad believes that a sensitive parent can help get over the bedwetting, the sibling rivalry, whatever the particular problem your children are having. He can handle it without seeing the child and has an awful lot to say about conventional therapy. Let's find out what he does have to say. Welcome, Jacob Azerrad, to People Are Talking. Oh, yes, we are. Welcome to the show, sir.
We're glad to have you on the show. But Richard says something interesting. How can you be a child psychologist and not see the child?
Well, what I basically do is I meet with the parents, and I find out from them what kinds of problems they're having, what kinds of concerns they have. And by way of asking them very specific questions as to what they're seeing in their child, the specific behavior problems, I can actually see the child through their eyes and begin to prescribe some methods for changing.
Well, that sounds more like family therapy without the child. Is that basically
what it basically is I teach the parents how to be better parents. I teach the parents how to do things differently, and as a way of changing their responses toward their children, their children's behaviors change.
Have children gotten worse or parents gotten worse? In the past decade, we've seen so many help books on how to help parents cope with the children, how to help deal with the children, and we certainly know that you are noted in your field for doing that. Is there a need for what you do? I mean, has it changed since our parents were raising us?
I don't think that children have gotten worse. I think parents have become overly sensitive to problem behaviors, okay? They've become overly sensitive to small little things that possibly indicate to them, as they've been taught by psychologists and psychiatrists, that maybe there's a problem, there's an emotional problem, something is bothering the child, something within him has to be understood.
Parents are just more aware, I guess you're saying.
They're more aware, and not only are they more aware, but they actually can create mountains out of molehills. They can take small things that parents in the past have overlooked, and because they look at them so intently, because they give so much of their attention and so much of their involvement for these so-called problem behaviors, they actually can create problem behaviors.
But the only thing about that is that parents are not objective about when they're talking to you about their children. I mean, the whole thing is tainted a bit.
That is true.
And by seeing the child, as the conventional therapist does, and I know you have things to say about conventional therapy, you have an opportunity to be objective because you are an impartial person between the parent and the child. Don't you feel that that's a good approach, to find out what it is that's making the child tick or not?
Let me tell you, I think that people don't usually know what goes on when they take their child to a child psychologist. What usually goes on is that child psychologist does what's called play therapy. Since children are not terribly verbal, they usually don't know what their problems are. They don't talk about what their problems are. Usually they're not even aware of why they're there. The psychologist usually does a lot of playing with the child. They play checkers, they play chess, they play with games, they have the child draw pictures. And what they basically are doing is, by way of these kinds of game activities and play activities, they're attempting to get at the root causes of the child's problem, okay? And what I'm saying is that approach, okay, is totally unsubstantiated in terms of the research. All the research evidence indicates that working with children using play therapy is as good as doing nothing. That if you have two groups of matched children, one group in play therapy for a year, and another group put on a waiting list for a year, at the end of a year, they both will improve, but the group on the waiting list will do as well as the one that's...
Then what do you say to the graphologist, excuse me, that was on this show just recently, who showed us 8x10 drawings with the family down in the bottom corner, and that, in her opinion, indicated the child had a poor self-esteem, or drew a family picture and made daddy big and mommy little?
Let me tell you something. That's the biggest hoax ever perpetrated on mankind. I will tell you that this is storytelling.
On mankind and us.
On mankind and us, okay? I will tell you that this approach, in terms of her analyses of these drawings, whether the drawings have missing fingers or the drawings are stiff or they're small or they're large, are analyses which, if you had different psychologists look at the same drawings, you get different analyses from those same
So,
drawings.
oh, see, I
mean,
thought
what
it
always
sounded pretty
amazes-
good. She said, you know, if you
It
get a child
sounds great.
that writes, and we saw the pictures of the photographs of the children who would write like in the corner and real squiggly, and that means that the child is shy and
Yeah.
unable to...
Let me ask you something. What always amazes me is why no one ever asks people like this, and psychologists do this every day. How do you know that what you're saying, in terms of your analyses of these drawings or these handwriting, bits of handwriting, how do you know that it's valid? How do you know that what you're saying is in fact
True, but how do you know that the conclusions you draw from the interviews with the parents are valid?
Because in terms of the methods that I use, in terms of reinforcement theory, they are backed by hard evidence, hard research. If I can refer you to journals, I can refer you to the Journal of Behavior Research and Therapy, the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. There are numerous journals which indicate that using certain reinforcement procedures does in fact have specific, very significant effects on children's behavior.
Now we've got a lot of mothers who are going to be calling you in just a few minutes who have probably tried all kinds of things just this side of going to an expensive therapist and who have not been able to get to that problem. What are some of your methods for making us better parents?
Parents have to give their children behaviors. They have to teach their children behaviors that will bring their child success. And success after success after success, whether it's social success, success academically, success in terms of doing things more on your own, and being more mature and more independent will lead to feelings of self-esteem. And what I teach parents to do is how to look for quiet behaviors that will increase those children's feelings of self-esteem. For example, if you have a child who is having no friends, he turns children off, he pushes and shoves and name calls and does all kinds of things that turn kids off. What I feel is that child has to learn how to be a better friend. And I teach parents to look for glimmers of how to win friends' behaviors. Sharing, thoughtful, taking turns in a game behaviors, praising other children behaviors, allowing the other child to make a decision as opposed to being bossy. I teach the parents how to look for these behaviors and build on these behaviors.
In the meantime, this child is wreaking havoc on the rest of the family, on himself, on the parent. And so how do you...
And I also teach them how to not reward all those negative behaviors. What usually happens is when the parent sees all these negative behaviors, they play psychologist or a psychiatrist, and they sit down and they say, why do you do that? How would you like it if someone did that to you? How can you be a friend? You know, you wouldn't like that if someone did that to you.
So
why
what are you
do you
saying
push?
we do?
That's wrong.
And I'm saying that by sermonizing and by spending lots and lots of time following these negative behaviors, you're teaching your children that these behaviors have a handsome payoff, and what's going to happen is they're going to start happening more often.
So what you're saying is if you sit there and you give them a lot of time and attention
for negative behaviors,
they're going to like that.
That's right, and they're going to have, what you're going to give them the time for are the behaviors that don't make noise. You're going to take your child aside, and when he praises another child, you're going to take him aside in private, and you're going to say, you know, I saw you playing with Johnny this afternoon, and he made a nice airplane model, and you said, hey, that's a good model, I like that. And you say something like, you know, people like that in a friend. You were being a good friend. Hey, it pleases me to see that. I'm very, very pleased to see that.
So you're saying when that child does all these negative things, they're just doing it for attention?
I am saying they're doing those negative things because your time, your involvement, your caring immediately follow those negative things.
Really?
Those negative things are red flags that indicates he has a problem, and since he has a problem, you want to solve it, and you sit down and you spend 5, 10, 15, 20. I've had parents who've told me that they spend a half hour or 40 minutes with their child talking about negative behaviors, talking about why do you do it, what's bothering you. Let it out. Tell me why you're doing it.
Then what you're saying is that when you take that child to a conventional therapist, he sits there and further reinforces the negative by dwelling on what it is that's making you be bad.
Dwelling on the negative reinforces the negative. This whole concept of letting it out, you know, letting out those bad negative feelings and sitting down and kind of, he has something bothering him, we have to have him let out his problems, whether it's by way of play, by way of talking, that's not terribly far removed from being possessed and letting out demons.
I hope there are therapists watching today because I want them to call you.
Well, no doubt there are a lot of parents watching today who have problems with your children, and you have come just this, as Richard said, short of going to a therapist, cannot afford it. Well, you can this morning by just calling 481-1313. We'll be back to talk about the problems you're having with your child.